Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're continuing our series exploring the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPP.
Right, taking it piece by piece.
Yeah.
It's the essential guide for patent examiners and practitioners.
Exactly. And today we're jumping into Chapter 2100, which is all about patentability.
A big chapter.
Huge. And specifically, we're focusing on Section 2171. That's the one titled, Two Separate Requirements for Claims Under 35 U.S.C. 112b, or Pre-AIA 35 U.S.C. 112, second paragraph.
Phew, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But basically, it gets down to the absolute core of what makes a patent claim legally acceptable language-wise.
So our mission today is to really unpack those two requirements. What are they and why are they separate?
Okay, let's get into it. At its core, Section 2171 states that any claim to be valid under 112b has to meet two specific tests. They're related, definitely, but distinct.
Okay, distinct test. What's the first one?
The first one is subjective. It means the claim language must genuinely reflect what the inventor or inventors, if it's a team, subjectively sees as their invention.
So it has to match what's actually in the inventor's head, their own understanding.
Pretty much. It's about authenticity, making sure the claim aligns with the inventor's specific inventive concept, not just some generic description.
Okay, that's the subjective part. What's the second requirement?
The second requirement is objective. This means the claim must define the invention's boundaries, its meets and bounds, clearly enough for others to understand.
Meets and bounds. I like that. Like putting up a fence around the invention.
Exactly like that. It means the language has to be precise and definite so that someone skilled in that particular field, what we call a faceta person, having ordinary skill in the art, can read the claim and know exactly what technology is covered and what's not. Clear legal lines.
Got it. So subjective is about the inventor's personal concept. Objective is about clear public definition. But, I mean, don't these often go hand in hand? Why the emphasis on them being separate?
Well, they often do overlap, but their legal purpose is different. The subjective check ensures the claim truly represents the inventor's contribution. It's linked to their discovery.
All right, authenticity.
Yeah. And the objective check is all about public notice. It ensures the world knows the scope of the patent right. You need that clarity so others can innovate around it or know if they might be infringing. It prevents ambiguity down the road.
That makes sense. You need both for a claim to really work legally. Let's use that example you mentioned, the vague widget claim.
Ah, yes, the classic device for performing a task.
Okay, so say an inventor creates a really specific, maybe a clever spring-loaded gear thingy.
Right, something quite detailed in their mind.
But the claim just says a device for performing a task. How does that potentially fail both of these requirements we're talking about?
Okay, let's break that down. Subjectively, if the inventor knows their invention is that specific gear mechanism, then claiming just a device for performing a task likely doesn't capture what they regard as their invention. It's too broad, too generic compared to their actual concept.
It doesn't match their internal picture.
Exactly. It fails to reflect their subjective understanding. Now, objectively...
It failed objectively.
Well, for a faceta reading a device for performing a task, what does that even mean? It's incredibly indefinite. Does it cover any device? A hammer? A computer? You can't tell. It doesn't define those meets and bounds with nearly enough precision. So a skilled person wouldn't know the actual scope of the claimed invention. The language just isn't clear enough for legal purposes.
I see. So it's vague for others, and it might not even be what the inventor really meant to claim. So an examiner could reject it under 112.
Absolutely. And the rejection could be based on either ground or both. Either it's indefinite failing the objective test, or it fails to correspond to what the specification indicates the inventor regards as the invention failing the subjective test.
This separation must be really important during the actual patent examination process, then.
Oh, definitely. It's a crucial part of the examiner's job. They aren't just looking at, say, novelty under 102 or obviousness under 103, comparing it to prior art.
Right, not just is it new.
Exactly. They also have to make sure the claims themselves are properly written according to Section 112b. Is the language clear? Is it unambiguous? Does it seem to match the invention described?
So they're gatekeepers for claim quality, essentially, making sure the description is locked down before the patent issues.
That's a good way to put it. This review helps prevent problems later. Clear claims mean less confusion about what the patent actually covers.
And when an examiner does reject a claim on these grounds, how do they explain it? Do they have to specify which requirement it failed?
Yes, they should. The MPP advises examiners to be clear about the basis for the 112b rejection. Is it indefiniteness? Or is it a failure to properly claim what the inventor seems to regard as the invention based on the disclosure?
Are there specific cases that guide this?
Yeah, the MPP points to cases like in res let's and ex parte ionescu. Let's stress that if a claim is rejected as indefinite, the examiner needs to point out the specific language and explain why it's unclear. Ionescu dealt more with situations where claims seemed broader than what the inventor actually described as their invention, touching on that subjective alignment issue. These precedents help ensure the rejections are specific and justified.
Okay, so it's a really foundational check. And it sounds like this idea of claim clarity from Section 2171 isn't just isolated here. It ripples through the whole MPP, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. You can think of 2171 as setting a baseline requirement that enables a lot of other patent procedures to even function correctly.
Like what? How does it connect elsewhere? What about, say, figuring out if an application has multiple inventions? Like restriction requirements or double patenting issues mentioned in Chapter 800.
Perfect example. Restriction practice, deciding if one application actually covers several distinct inventions, hinges entirely on understanding what each claim covers.
Makes sense.
If the claims are vague, how can an examiner possibly tell if invention A defined in one set of claims is patentably distinct from invention B in another set? They need those clear metes and bounds from 112B to make that call. Same goes for non-statutory double patenting. You need clear claims to compare them.
So, clarity first, then you can sort out the inventions. Even for design patents. Chapter 1500 mentioned those.
Right. Even though design patents usually have a single claim defined by drawings, the core idea of clearly defining the scope of the claimed ornamental design is still a metes and bounds issue, just visually represented.
Okay, that connects. What about procedural stuff, like claiming priority back to an earlier application, under 35 U.S.C. 119 or 120? Chapters 200, 1500, 2900 mention this.
Yeah, claiming priority depends on showing the claimed subject matter in your current application is adequately supported by the disclosure in the earlier one, whether it's a provisional, another non-provisional, or even a foreign filing.
And you can only do that comparison if the claims are clear.
Exactly. You need clear claims in the later application to know what you're comparing to the earlier disclosure. That clarity from 112B is fundamental to making that priority claim valid.
Wow, okay. What about really technical details, like sequence listings in biotech? Chapter 2400 talked about specific formats, WIPO, ST.26, XML.
That too. Sequence listings often form the basis for claims to specific genes or proteins. The claims need to clearly refer to these sequences, and the sequences themselves need to be presented in a clear, standardized format like ST.26. It's all part of ensuring the claim language and its technical support are precise and understandable, tying back to the clarity principles of a 112B.
It really seems to touch everything. Post-grant procedures, too, like supplemental examination from Chapter 2800.
Definitely. In supplemental examination, the patent owner submits information and has to explain its relevance to each claim.
Oh, okay.
Well, you can't explain relevance to a claim if the claim itself is fuzzy, right? You need those defined metes and bounds to understand how the new information impacts the claim's validity. The rules, like 37 CFR 1.61 arrow, rely on that clarity.
And I bet appeals often center on this, too. Chapter 1200.
Oh, frequently. Disputes over claim interpretation are a huge part of appeals before the Patent Trial and Appeal Board. Whether a claim meets the clarity and definiteness standards of 112B is argued constantly.
So, wrapping this part up, Section 2171, with its dual subjective and objective requirements for claims, it's not just one rule among many, it's foundational.
It really is bedrock. Clear claims are essential for examination, for defining rights, for allowing others to innovate, for resolving disputes. Everything builds on that foundation.
So, bring this back to our listener. What's the practical takeaway here? Why should someone, maybe an inventor or just someone curious about patents, really care about Section 2171?
Well, if you're involved in patents in any way, drafting, prosecuting, challenging, or just trying to understand one, you have to get this. Grasping these two requirements is key.
It's not just legalese.
Not at all. It's about ensuring fairness and function. Clear claims protect the inventor by clearly defining their property, but they also serve the public by letting everyone else know what territory is occupied. It avoids uncertainty and, ideally, promotes more innovation because people know where the lines are drawn.
Drawing those property lines clearly.
That's the goal.
Okay. Before we finish, we really want to give a sincere thank you to Mike Shepard. He's the creative director who makes this whole project possible.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. And we also need to include the standard disclaimer. Please remember, this summary of the MPEP was put together using AI tools like ChatGPT and NotebookLM. It might have errors or leave things out.
Right. It's for general educational info only. It is definitely not legal advice, and it's no substitute for reading the official MPP or consulting a qualified patent practitioner or instructor.
Please rely on the official sources for any critical decisions.
So that concludes our deep dive into MPP Section 2171 and the two crucial requirements for patent claims. But here's something to think about.
Always a good way to end.
How does that tension, the one between an inventor's possibly evolving subjective idea and the legal system's demand for fixed, objective, crystal-clear claim language, how does that tension actually shape innovation itself? And maybe, as technology gets more complex, like AI or biotech, does defining those metes and bounds with perfect clarity become even harder?
That's a fascinating question. It's a constant push and pull at the heart of patent law. How do we capture cutting-edge ideas in language that meets these strict legal tests?
Definitely something to chew on. We hope this discussion gave you some valuable insights. Please join us next time for another deep dive.